And welcome to Of the People.
Robert.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Robert Chernin. And Ericka, what are we missing?
Ooh, my patience and tolerance.
Yeah, okay, I got that part. Well, we're missing the monologue because you know what? So there's so much we need to get to that I didn't figure people wanted just to hear me flapping my gums, right? It's like, stop flapping your gums, Mabel. But
there was a lot in the
I
in
guarantee
the news this
you
week. A lot.
That between WTO, where's the outrage, of course, and DC, I mean, there's so much, but I want to start with something a little, I don't know if the word innocuous, but you know that old saying that good things come in little packages?
I mean,
well, you know, it's funny. It's funny you should bring that up,
but
because it turns out that probably the shortest emperor in history, Napoleon, apparently there's a big news article out that not only was he short in stature, but he was short in schmeckle, which would be about, you know, apparently it's 1.5 inches. And wait,
what? How would you even?
Because the doctor who treated him after he died cut it off, and it has been auctioned off, and it has been passed around the world. So, see, I thought so. No, look, I've been to Napoleon's tomb in France, and I always thought that like all of him was in the tomb, but apparently there was a piece missing.
Yeah.
Now wait, so you don't so.
Not his. Wait, can we say?
You know, I mean, they
say the word?
They do say in the article. So
penis?
I mean, so apparently he dies 203 years ago, and the legendary petite private part was last known to be in the hands of an Englewood, New Jersey urologist who bought it at a Paris auction in 1977. You know, it's 77, but it opens up the questions. First of all, I mean, look, I like buying stuff at auction. Okay, I've never had private parts being auctioned off that I know of.
Right,
but I mean. You know, you want to talk about owning a piece of history? You're speechless. You're speechless. I love that part.
I think that. Well, I'm thinking this is going to come out very rude, and somebody listening is going to
get ready to bleeper.
Offended.
Get ready to bleeper.
But, you know, I feel like I'm like. I think I know everything I need to know about you if you buy a penis at auction. I just feel like that's all I need to know about you as a human being to kind of know you.
The doctor who bought the Napoleon's private parts. Now you got to remember the guy's 5'5", so he's 5'5" and 1.5 inches. So it makes you understand why he had this inferiority complex. Just to start with, I mean, there was nothing significant about him other than his military victories.
Poor guy.
Well, poor Josephine, when you really think about it. But in any event, this guy also was into, he did research on Abraham Lincoln and JFK assassinations.
Well, wait, hold on. Robert. How do we know that he wasn't a grower and not a shower?
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Because that's the thing.
Okay.
It's totally.
I'm not even going there. I just the fact that this is an auctionable item, and that someone sort of they cut it off, and that anyway. However, segueing.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. Well, this sets the tone and demeanor for the show, because the show is going to be all about small things. So I figured we would start out with small things, and no, it's not a monologue. But speaking of small things, who's in the news again? One of my many girlfriends, Hillary Rodham Clinton. She does an interview for the New York Times, and she says, and I quote, "Well, the reason I lost in 2016 is because women left me because I wasn't perfect." And you sit there and go,
so women are sexist now.
So she's being interviewed, and you know how we like to pull up articles, because, this is how I find all my crap. Anyways, right? Because supposed to be perfect. They left me because they just couldn't take a risk on me, because as a woman, I'm supposed to be perfect. They're willing to take a risk on Trump, who had a long list of, let's call them flaws, to illustrate his imperfection, because he was a man, and they could envision a man as president and commander. And I mean, she's like the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, and by the way, wait a minute, 2016, 2020, we're like 2.5 elections away from that, and she's still like, ripping her clothes, meaning, and pounding her chest.
It's all someone else's fault but hers? Like, what, dude? No, you just suck, and everyone hates you. Why can't you just admit it?
I sit there and I go, it's the truth is, on a very serious note, in my lifetime, if you trace back where I think politics is always right, like sausage making. It's always, the process is, bloody and ugly, but if it's done right and seasoned properly, the sausage is delicious at the end of the process. That's an analogy people often use for politics, right? But if I have to go back in history, in my lifetime at least, and where I think politics sort of went off the rail in terms of, relative ethics and decency, as opposed to power and win at all costs. And there's certain exceptions to that. But it was the Clinton administration and the Clinton years and the foreign money. And people forget Johnny Wong and the Buddhist temple. And, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Right. And all those other things where I sit here and I go, and she's still, like pounding her chest that she was somehow robbed. And in this case, she was robbed because women left her because she's supposed to be perfect. No, you weren't supposed to be perfect, Hillary. You were just supposed to be not be a cretin, right? You were supposed to
just not a butthole.
Right.
You're not supposed to offend
only half.
Everyone
the
in
basket
the
of deplorables, right? Totally arrogant, totally dismissive.
Oh, my bad.
I mean, one of the things I think all politicians who are successful in office is they have the ability to feel your pain and to connect with people. And there's a likability factor, right? Bill Clinton, whatever you think of President Clinton, former President Clinton, had a likability factor, right? He had a, he had a feel your pain
he played
factor.
The saxophone.
And then there's, Hillary, I ain't no Tammy Wynette, stand by my man Clinton. So I read this stuff and I just sit there and go, I think, frankly, the more that Hillary talks, the better off we all are. Now, there are certain things with her. Look, I agree on her, policy towards Israel and things like that. So it's not like I totally disagree with policy positions, but I can support someone's policy positions without supporting the person. So.
Correct. And that's the thing is, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And so, hey, that's what I do. That's what I do. So it's, I think that, and it actually, as much as I dislike Hillary Clinton, generally speaking, it is also important for us to remember that not everyone
is all good. No one is all good.
Although
no one is all good and
terrible.
All bad. Not everyone.
Right. What did I say? Not everyone? No one? Yes.
Thank you. Do I get like a star in my corner for that?
A gold star for semantics.
I ain't got no good English, but that's okay.
Get it.
So but grammar, okay, I could do that. But I just sit there. So
I like it.
Yeah. In any event, I want to segue because we're back on this WTO kick, and I want you to look up a name for me. I want you to look up Tanya Fernandez Anderson, who happens to be a Boston City Council member. So she's right up there. What's the Dalton Henyard? What's her name? The mayor. Yeah. So she's right up there with it. Now, first of all, she is the first illegal immigrant excuse me. Let me get this right. She is the first undocumented African-born immigrant and first Muslim elected in the city of Boston. She is off the.
Wait. She's not an American citizen?
You got to remember something. You have to remember something. The Constitution applies federally, and the Constitution does not say you have to be a citizen to vote. It leaves it up to the states. I mean, you have to be a U.S. citizen with certain requirements, right, to vote in federal election or hold federal office, right? But that's it. Other than that, it's silent, and it turns. And we're talking states' rights. So the city of Boston, and we're going to talk about D.C. City Council as well, because they have this whole same stuff going on. So you have this woman who's elected, and who says that she wants to dismantle the white backdrop and create a revolution. And someone filed a complaint against her anonymously for a hostile, verbally abusive, and anti-Semitic environment. Right She is yelling and screaming at city public council meetings. She is saying stuff like, hang on, where are we? What the F do I have to do in this effing council to get respect as a black woman? I can't even call you guys cowards because desperation deserves mercy. Your votes here are sometimes racist. I am here to represent every black woman and man in the community. We should dismantle the white backdrop in America, and we should restructure it so that it's welcoming. So she wants a welcoming environment, but the way she's going about it doesn't seem very welcoming to me. It's just
well, and I call me crazy. Okay, now I understand we're not responsible for our family per se. However, Wikipedia says her husband is in jail for murder,
and she signs this ethics thing. She signs an ethics. Well, first of all, she would not take the pledge of office. Now, right? So hang on, let me get my facts straight because I know someone's going to call me.
Who are these people?
Somebody's going to. She infamously refused to swear the oath required of elected officials, pledging her allegiance to the United States and to carry out her duties with impartiality. Do you think that would have been your first clue?
What? I mean, again, I go back to the quote from last week. Okay, democracy is the idea that people know what they want and they deserve to get it good and hard. Okay, people up in the Northeast.
Wait. I'm in the Northeast.
You want democracy so bad. You don't like our representative republic. Fine, y'all can go live on your own in California. I say we just annex California and let all the freaking socialists and communists move to California.
Well, I think we should find a way to have the San Andreas Fault sort of because you have to have a physical separation, right? So I mean, that's like, right? If you're not physically separated, oh yeah, well, we're divorced, but we're living in the same house. There's got to be a physical separation, right? So
why don't we send them to Canada?
I think that is a bonne idée. But so here's the other thing. She signs in, city's conflict of interest training. Okay. And pledge. Okay. And then right afterwards, she puts her sister and her son on the payroll. I mean, I shouldn't laugh because it's really sad, but you sit there and you wonder, what were these people thinking? She wants to defund the police, cut $30 million. I mean, I sit here and I look at these articles. And obviously, here's the other thing that they say about her is that she has spent the last 6 or 7 months has been so focused on passing resolutions condemning Israel that she hasn't been doing her job and hasn't been showing up. So she's sort of like, Hilliard. I just, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Boston, where's the outrage? Well, first of all, who elected this mug?
They love it. Are you kidding me? They elected Michelle Wu, who's a psychopath. Okay, she was like, yeah, we should totally have segregated Christmas parties and segregated stuff. And what's the problem? I don't know what your problem is. We just accidentally invited you. I don't know why you're mad that you're being uninvited from the party that doesn't include white people.
Well, it is true that we are fast becoming, if we have not becoming, we have sort of regressed into a segregated nation in many respects, not everywhere and everything, but in terms of sort of, race relations, you can have all black or all, what was that acronym? BIPOC? BIPOC?
Oh, yeah. Because everyone who's not white is exactly the same.
And there's a bridge in Brooklyn I would like to
know
show
that?
you. It's old, made of wood, but it's in really good condition. But
so here's my prediction.
Excuse me.
You ready for this?
Lord Benjamin, drum roll, please.
Where's my tinfoil hat? Okay, so I don't know. I know you probably haven't watched the show because you don't watch things that don't have dead people.
No, I only watch things that have dead people in it. That's in black and white. So there was this show called The Handmaid's Tale, okay? And you've probably heard people, the Republicans are going to make The Handmaid's Tale come true. And stupid people were protesting outside of the Supreme Court with the little red I did see that. I didn't see the movie,
But this is my theory. In fact. Okay, so it takes place in the Northeast where these crazy people are, the Handmaid's Tale. It's all like in the Northeast.
Must be in Boston.
And this doesn't include you, Robert, because I know you're in New Hampshire. Yep. Oh, totally. So because all the Northeasterners are so crazy and, you know, they don't believe in God.
That's not all
and
of
they want to murder
us
babies
up here.
up to the point of birth. And
aren't you paying?
Everyone but New Hampshire,
Mr. Shepard,
and Jay.
Of course. I mean, look. There are Republicans in Vermont. Yeah. I think Jay is one of two of them.
So this is what. But my point is, if The Handmaid's Tale comes true, it's going to be because of the left and not the right. They're the ones mandating all this stuff that's, you know, caused an increase in miscarriages and birth defects and women not being able to conceive at all, which again is part of The Handmaid's Tale. And then you guys are discriminatory. You think it's cool to treat people like cattle. Like if we disagree with you, you don't matter. You're not a human being, which is how you can dehumanize people and treat them like cattle. So anyway, point is, tinfoil hat says, if Handmaid's Tale comes true, it is 100% going to be because of the left and people like Tanaya Fernandez Anderson and Michelle
I think
Wu's
Councilwoman Anderson is a good example of they're intolerant. Look, that's why we've always argued that this whole wokeism, because that is vintage. I mean, can wokeism be vintage? Because it's probably too new to be vintage. But in any event, sort of an oxymoron. But it is vintage or doctrinaire, if you will, wokeism, where it's okay to be intolerant as long as you are faithful to the cause. It is only the unbelievers or the infidel or those who are kafir, right? You know, if you're going into the Quran, the kafir are the unclean or unfaithful who do not listen to the word of God, or in this case, the word of the woke God, right? So in that case, it's okay, right? And
that's right.
The greatest transgressor and blasphemer who is not woke, who needs to be cast out, is Donald Trump, of course. And look, we've already established that no one is perfect and no one's all good and all bad, but Donald Trump is all bad, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that, but that's what. So therefore, because Donald Trump is all bad,
that's what they're saying.
Anything you do, even to sacrifice rule of law, impartiality of rule of law, even these political stunt trials. And because we're going to get, by the way, there's another segment, we're going to cover the whole classified documents thing, because they just discovered an email and a trove of information that shows that even the classified document sting was a setup, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Oh, no. This gets really deep.
Yeah.
This gets deep, but going.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Speaking of deep,
Muad'Dib.
Speaking of deep, the Israel-American relationship is pretty deep, and that's why we're going to be celebrating it on July 10th at
which
Israel
is a made-for-TV show going to be streamed on all the streaming channels like Roku, Dish, Apple TV, and folks, it's not a live event that happens to be streaming. It's a live TV event in front of an audience. Think of it like the Johnny Carson show, for those who remember. Roll them.
Yeehaw.
And never again is
All
now.
right.
And that's what people need to understand. Loosely translated or loosely paraphrased, Abraham Lincoln once said that evil persists when good people or people of goodwill do nothing. And that's what they're counting on.
That's right.
The special relationship with Israel, not because they're a Jewish state, not because they're our ally, but all the positive contributions in the world. So this is not just a, hey, let's all get together and have 500 people in the seat. This is going to reach millions of people streaming on all the channels across the country. That's the important piece of this, because no one is pushing back on the narrative, and no one is putting out the real information about why Israel, the small nation, is so important, not only in the Middle East, but to the world. Because, to give you a little hint, we're going to look at the world, what it might look like if Israel didn't exist, because that's what River to the Sea means. Ooh. Stay tuned for Israel Appreciation Day. It's going to be a very special event. I hope you'll join us. Certainly tune in on one of your streaming channels, Roku, Apple TV, Dish Network, some others as well. So be there or be square. Excellent. So I'm debating, right? Because you and I are sort of going so long today that we have a few more WTOs, but then there's this whole DC watch thing because there's so much stuff going on. I'm going to let you choose. Where are we going next? What do you want to go to? Come on, make a decision.
Oh, the W. Well, we don't want to bury the lead. So let's
the DC watch. The former. So did you hear what happened at Quantico? And by the way, do you know where Quantico is? You know what Quantico is, right? No, it's the U.S. Marines. It's the U.S. Marines training headquarters. The FBI and the DEA do some training there. So the other day, they apprehended 2 Jordanian nationals. Okay. Right, you probably missed this in the news. They apprehend 2 Jordanian nationals who had a box truck that tried to get into the base. Right. Allegedly, they were from Amazon. They obviously put up the barriers and whatever. And it turns out that one of them crossed the border illegally in San Diego. Another one is a student who overstayed their visa. And everyone who's in the know that I'm talking to says, much like 9/11, they did this dry run about getting on planes and box cutters and getting them through security, is they were testing the security at Quantico for a future attack. Now, maybe will do it and maybe they won't. But give me another explanation as to why 2 Jordanian nationals who just happened to take a wrong turn and end up in Quantico, which, by the way, if you've been there, which I have, you can't really take a wrong turn.
You can't take a wrong turn. And they're Amazon delivery drivers.
No, Amazon denies
illegal immigrants.
Amazon denies it. So Amazon said it was looking into it. Yeah.
No, I'm clear about that. They couldn't get a job at Amazon as illegal I sit there and immigrants.
Okay. It's just, and again,
wow.
Look, I don't want to be incendiary. I don't want to be, flame or fan the flames of conspiracy theories. Lord knows I do that enough on other things, but someone needs to explain to me why that isn't in the news more. Because we generally look for buried articles, because the other stuff you're going to see on the news at 6, or you're going to go to Fox, or you're going to go to CNN, but. Well, no, but you're going to see the big stories that are up here, right?
Over and over.
But it's the little stories that maybe they're on the news for like 3 minutes somewhere, like the Trump trial. You want to know what's going on in the Trump trial? Turn on CNN, because it's 24/7, right?
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about the fact that 2 illegal immigrants
there's 2 things on the news that you're never going to see these days. Number one is little stories like this. And number 2, the fact that there are still hostages being held in Gaza. And we are, let's see, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. We're 7 months into this. So that gets us 200 and some odd days. Why don't you hear about the hostages? Why don't you see their pictures?
Because here's the thing. All of these things indicate a failure of the current administration and of Democrats.
No.
They have had
Trump's fault.
No?
It's Trump's fault.
Well, that's how they're trying to spin it. Whenever any of the actual problems going on in the country happen to leak out into the public, they try to blame Trump for it. And it's like,
it's Trump's fault.
I'm sorry. Yo, you can say a lot about Trump. There is a treasure trove of criticism for Donald Trump, but the border crisis is definitely not one of them.
Under the heading of, if you break it, you own it. Right. If it happens during your watch, you're on it.
Yeah.
Right. You can try to blame a prior administration. That's sort of a old thing that most, administrations do. They want to deflect. But there are two major world cataclysms that are going on right now that started during the Biden administration. The Hamas war, or Israel's, war, against Hamas, is one. And the Russia-Ukraine war, or Ukraine-Russia war, I don't know what the proper name is. Both happen under Biden's watch, on top of which he gives Iran $100 billion and removes sanctions. So,
and that's that's just the surface, Robert. We're not even talking about all the coups that are happening in Africa, Lebanon, Syria, like all the crazy madness that's happening, China aggressing on Taiwan. I mean, basically, okay.
You're going to go out on a limb?
You're going
to go out on a limb?
I was
Wait, you were wrong?
It's possible.
You were wrong. Wait.
I want to hear the possible.
Words. Come on.
It's possible that I was
right. I know you have a hard time. So does that mean I was right? Or is this like your husband was right?
Possible that I was wrong.
I was right and you were wrong.
It's possible that you might be more right than me in some ways. I know, I'm admitting it. I definitely tend toward being an isolationist. I mean, that's the reality. Like, I don't want to spend money on wars. I don't want to be the world police. I don't want to try to tell people how to run their country. Like, I don't think that's our responsibility. But I do also recognize at the same time that when there is not a strong, united States, a strong, United States, that the tyrants of the world go crazy, and they're just like, we're just gonna.
You bring up an interesting point, right? I mean, and I'm old enough to have lived through the Cold War, and to see the fall of the Berlin Wall, and to see the fall of the Soviet Union. But at that time, the world was divided into two superpowers, allegedly, right? The USSR, Soviet Union, and the United States, and that balance of power created sort of a stability at the high level. It did allow for sort of some theater activity in terms of through proxies and other things. You have the fall of the Soviet Union, right? I think in the 80s, the year actually escapes me these days. There's too much crap in my head. But and for a short, brief time, they call it a peace dividend, right? For a short time, the United States was the acknowledged single superpower in the world. That has now changed, and we can discuss whether it was done intentionally or not. I would argue was done intentionally, internally, and you would probably agree. But no one can argue the fact that the United States has lost its perch as the sole superpower. China's ascension and sort of competition for hegemony, their Belt and Road initiative in the Southern Hemisphere. They're throwing money around, basically. Certainly the new, what I would call axis of evil, which would be China, Iran, and Russia, certainly are a counterbalance to the U.S., even if they were, still the single superpower, which I would argue they're not. So yeah, in that instance, I think you get a scenario where the world is less stable, and therefore you're going to see, number one, more theaters where there is going to be conflict. And number two, you're going to see the reemergence, and I've argued this for, I don't know, the last year we've been on, of realpolitik, which is sort of a German principle, capital R, small k, basically says an enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is there will be regional alliances that will shift depending on what the issue is. So Israel, out of necessity, is going to have to move out of this sole reliance on the United States and look for other allies, especially when they're getting their weapons cut off, from them. And other countries the same thing. You're going to see multipolar. We're already in a multipolar world where the U.S. and China are clearly the two strongest countries, but there's still only so much we can do in a multipolar world. And everyone, the 20th century, Dr. Bruce Abramson likes to say that the 20th century was really the American century, and I would agree with that. But the 21st century is yet to be stamped, and it's looking more like it may be China's century. We'll see.
Well, and I think that it's so important right now for us to just be diligent, be paying attention, be aware, and don't take for granted that, that the United States still does have the opportunity to retake the moral high ground here. But it is hard after, you like the whole thing about the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then, so we do all this stuff with Saudi Arabia, right? As an example, we need them for oil or this or that or the third. And then they kill people in the press, and we're like, oh man, how do we,
well, but their values are,
but then at the same time,
their values aren't our values.
Was president. Well, and that's the thing. And so like, there's all that weird stuff. But then at the same time, when Trump was president, we got the Abraham Accords.
Which, by the way, the Biden administration, let's be clear.
We don't have
the Abraham Accords was an inversion of what has been acknowledged or accepted U.S. policy since certainly Camp David Accords or the Oslo Agreement, which was that you have to have a Palestinian state before you can have peace in the Middle East. And what Donald Trump was able to do after moving the embassy to Jerusalem was to say, I don't agree with that. We need to take a fresh look at that. I think we can establish peace with other Middle East allies in Israel as a precursor to solving the, let's call it the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I am being way generous with labeling it as such, right? Because, Israel, as we've talked about, it's not in Israel's charter that you're going to drive the Palestinians into the sea or exterminate the people or using children as terror, as suicide bombers or shields. So let's not even get into that.
Shields.
But you're right. You had the Abraham Accords, but the Biden administration has now reversed that again, and they came out, Secretary of State, Tony Blinken basically said that a Palestinian state is a precursor or a prerequisite to peace in the Middle East. And what happens immediately thereafter, because he gave cover to it? Ireland, Spain, and I want to say Norway, I think, was the third country that came out and recognized the Palestinian state, which, by the way, I have a question for you. If there's now a Palestinian state, Ericka, right? Come on, wait, stay with me. If there's now a Palestinian state, does that mean that the right of return no longer exists because they already have a state? Does that mean there's no refugee issue?
What?
They have a state. And by the way, you also know that, so the right of return and from the river to the sea are the same concept. People don't understand it. They think, right of return is they get to return to their land pre-1948. That is all of Israel. So when people say right of return, like the Palestinians should have a right of return.
But it wasn't theirs to
You're arguing logic against a religion.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Are you like pounding on something? As long as it's not me or your husband.
I absolutely pounded on my desk.
And by the way, there was a hearing. I want to segue. So there was a hearing in the Senate hearing where Senator Ted Cruz, God bless him, right? What a keen analytical mind and just no bullshit, right? He just puts it out there. They are their witness or the person. It's not a witness, just testifying before the Senate committee was Secretary of State Anton Blinken. And here's what Ted Cruz had to say. He said, Mr. Secretary, you have presided over the worst foreign policy disaster of modern times. When Joe Biden became president, he inherited peace and prosperity in the world. We have simultaneously wars waging in the worst in Europe since World War II and the worst in the Middle East in 50 years. Both, I believe, because of this administration's consistent weakness, right? And let's not forget that after October 7th, what was the first communique leaked out of the White House or the State Department? Was urging Israel not to retaliate militarily, right? And Blinken gives some lame response, right? Let me see if I got this here. But
can you can you imagine, Robert? Can you imagine if after, I don't know, Pearl Harbor.
9/11. No, 9/11.
Or no, let's do some. I was going to say, let's do something more recently. So 9/11 happens. Can you imagine if our allies had come out and said, turn the other cheek? You just got to turn the other cheek.
I was always taught that when you turn the other cheek, you sort of spin around and give them a backhand, but that's a martial arts thing. So, sorry. You can take the boy out of Jersey. You really can't take Jersey out of the boy. But in any event, look, people need to understand the relativity of it. 1,300 Israelis being murdered, raped, and brutally just assaulted on October 7th is the equivalent of about 29,000 or 30,000 Americans on 9/11, referenced or indexed to their population density, right?
Yeah.
So the question you really have to ask people is, if on September 11th, right, 9/11, 01, right? If September 11th, if 30,000 Americans were murdered, and not just 3, and I'm not 3,000 too many, but if it was 30,000, what's acceptable then? Because war is war. There are no rules in war, right? War is ugly for a reason. But if 30,000 Americans perished in September, the attacks of September 11th, you're going to tell the Bush administration that, well, we think that you shouldn't respond militarily.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you this, Robert, and maybe I'm missing it. Okay, I'm going to be generous here. Maybe I'm missing it. Have you heard outcries and horror about innocent Russian civilians being killed by by that war? Have you heard about that? I haven't heard anything. Nobody seems to care about the Lebanese people getting killed by whatever's going on, or the Syrian people. They don't care about them. They don't care about the innocent Russians or Ukrainians that are being killed in that war. We don't care about any of those people. We somehow only care about Palestinians, supposedly.
Well,
I just, it's hard. Inconsistency makes me question.
You look for
I don't think you actually.
You look for political motives, or you look for monetary
care.
motives. Those are the only two things, right? I mean, what's the politics in it, or what's the motive? I mean,
That's
look,
right.
it's okay that Israel, and I don't want to. I mean, there's a whole other section we can get to. I don't want to, focus on it too much. I'm really talking about the Biden administration and the world they inherited versus, let's be honest, weakness breeds aggression. When you are perceived to be weak, then you have aggression, especially in a multipolar world, which is something we can get back to. But Israel is not allowed the right of self-defense, right? Or they're only allowed a proportionate response, and now they have so far exceeded their proportionate response that now they're genocidal, or they're committing war crimes. Was still right after October 7th when after the Biden administration said Israel should not respond militarily. Then they put out this nonsense about a proportional response, to which I said at the time, so let me see. So the Israelis should rape Palestinian women, cut off their genitalia, and burn babies while they're alive. Would that be the proportional response you're talking about? But again, you have to understand this is you can no more rationalize with Hamas because it's a religious fanaticism than you can with the mullahs of Iran, right? They do not.
That's right.
Adhere to Western rational thought. That doesn't mean that they're not rational. That doesn't mean that they aren't smart. It just means that their driving principles is a religious doctrine, and it's ideological, and it's not Western scientific, trust the science based. That's all. So. There's so much else I want to get into here, but I want to get back to, and I know we're jumping around, but I mean, I could just go on and on.
Well, hold on. We do need to take a quick break.
No, don't make that.
Before we go into the next segment.
Not that story. I know you should be.
So sorry. Do we want to hear from the defenders of American freedom today, or are we going to promo the event in July?
Of course, Israel Appreciation Day, coming to you live from
all
DC.
Right, you guys,
on all the streaming channels.
Word. July 10th, y'all.
And never again is now.
Never.
So since we're segueing, and God, there's so much stuff I can get to this. You talk a lot. I know. You talk a lot.
There's so much good stuff to talk
we would
about.
cover much more stuff if you didn't talk so much.
I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
Speaking of shutting up, so Bill Maher, is on The View last week, right? Well, I mean, it takes someone like Bill Maher to get those women to, shut their mouths from time to time. But, I think it was Sunny Hostin, I forget which one, was trying to call him out on wokeness and this. But he put out the most cogent argument in simplistic terms that the viewership can digest. And that was irrefutable. So if we have that clip, here's the clip of Bill Maher talking with the ladies of The View on the war in the Middle East. Roll them, Smokey.
All right, let me get the video up here. Hold on. I mean, it's very simple. Mm-hmm. It's very straightforward. And the fact that we need Bill effing Maher to be the voice of reason.
Look, have I taught you nothing? Real politic. An enemy of my enemy is my friend. Look, Strom Thurmond, the conservative senator from South Carolina, Ted Kennedy, the liberal, the Prince of Darkness to conservatives, could get together on things when they agreed and they disagreed. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. You work with people who agree with you on the issue. But when you're ideologically divided that you're good or you're good and they're evil, how do you come together to forge compromise on the issues you agree on? Right?
You don't.
So,
right?
so,
Talking
so,
to them is
so Bill Maher, well, because
them.
because they
Talking to
because
them
the
is
woke,
la, la, la.
the leadership or the high priests of wokeism, as I like to call them, or high priestesses mostly of wokeism, have successfully demagogued, demonized, and divided everyone, which is the 3 Ds you hear me talk about,
Yes.
so that we're now so polarized that you
Yep.
can't even find common ground on the issues we agree on, which on the Israel issue, right, it's really simple. If Hamas lays down their arms, there would be no war. And if Israel lays down their arms, there'd be no Israel. Until Israel didn't start the war.
Yep.
Hamas did. Israel's charter doesn't call for the extermination of the Palestinian people. Hamas's charter does. And by the way, don't quote me on the year, but I want to say it was 2004, or no, it might have been 2006 or 8 that Israel pulled out of Gaza, and they've had self-rule.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like 14 or 18 years. I don't really remember, but
yes,
but it's just too much stuff going in my head. But again, you juxtapose that to now you have 2 international courts. The UN court has just called for Israel to halt its military operation. So let me see if I got this right. Israel is attacked, and now you have the world body of the United Nations court saying that Israel has to stop its attack on Gaza, even though, so denying Israel the right of self-defense, because as Bill Maher points out, right, should Hamas be destroyed? If your answer is no, my next question is why. And if your answer is yes, then why isn't Israel afforded the opportunity as a country to defend itself? And some of that requires offensive operations in a defensive context in terms of why you got into this to begin with. It's right.
I don't. Here's the thing, Robert. Explain to me why the UN has any credibility left when they are trying to remove laws against child pornography and pedophilia around the world. Okay. That organization, once they got busted for having their people trafficking people and then calling for, for child brides and all that kind of stuff, like, you've lost all your credibility, United Nations.
Well, wait a minute.
Don't
wait
care
a minute.
what you say.
Wait a minute.
I mean, tell me why. Explain to me why they have any credibility.
So I think I can explain this fairly easily. Okay. Now, and in all truth, we should do an entire show on the United Nations, both the good and the bad, right? But the United Nations, like any government, does not have legitimacy in abstract. It only has legitimacy based on who are the people that are members or who participate in the system. You have to remember that the United Nations, and Lord knows I am not defending the United Nations. I think that it is an organization who is how do I say this nicely? It has become corrupt, but.
Oh yeah, I mean, China's
but there's a lot of oxymorons here. But at the end of the day, the United Nations is made up of countries that do not share the same values that a lot of the Western countries led by the United States do. So when you bring in these other countries that don't share your values, how do you expect them to, lack of a better term, toe the line or adopt those policies that are in contradiction to their policies? For instance, can we just talk about women's rights? So in any Muslim country, women do not have rights, or they have varying degrees of rights, or, they can't be out without a man. They have to wear a burqa or a covering. They can't run for office. They can't get educated. So on that alone,
can't have a job,
right? Those countries who believe that to be morally correct, and I'm giving them a wide berth here, that you bring them into a international organization. Do you think that they're going to check their culture and their morals at the door?
No, they're not going to stop thinking it's okay to marry 10-year-old girls or
taking the potential corruption issue out of this, which is a massive issue, right? let's just talk about the cultural mosaic that makes up the United Nations. These countries are not, and please understand, I am very critical of the United Nations. I think it has outlived its usefulness. Don't forget, we went from the League of Nations to the United Nations. I think it's time for, Western nations something, right? I mean, whatever. But let's find people who share our values and let's form an organization with them. But how can you look?
Yes.
Leopards don't change their spots, right? Walks like a duck, talks like a duck, usually a duck. All those old sayings applies to the United Nations, which is these countries that have these values are not going to change their values just because they're part of an international organization, peace organization, and they are still going to pursue their own self-interest.
Which also, and some of that is going to be destroying Israel.
You think?
So those same countries are obviously going to vote against Israel.
Right.
So stupid. Again, I like the way you said it's outlived its
usefulness. I am not arguing that there should not be some sort of world body, but point to me a world body, whether it's the World Trade Organization or the World Economic Forum or the United Nations or the, keep going. How many international organizations do you want me to cite? Find one of them that does not have anti-Western or anti-U.S. values at its core. Name one. I defy you to name one.
I can't.
So can we bring it back to this country for a second? There's a couple other things that as I'm looking at my list that I want to go over. Yeah. And one of them is, let's go back to the get Trump at any cost, right? So Orange Man is bad.
Orange Man bad.
I know that everyone is fixated on the Alvin Bragg, New York City, the trial in New York about overstating his values and Stormy Daniels, and it's salacious because it involves sex and pornography. I get that. And then there's the case down in Georgia, Fannie Willis also falling apart, right? That was the one that they were going to get him. Yep. But the one I want to focus on is the classified documents case that Jack Smith has brought at a federal level. So the argument on the case was that Trump was illegally keeping classified documents that he had no right to keep, and that it was and it was denying the government to keep these copies of the documents because they didn't have them. And Trump's argument was, I wanted these for my presidential library, which, by the way, is another question. Why does everyone else have really quickly put up a presidential library, but Trump hasn't? I wonder if it's all these courts keeping him busy and no one wants a Trump library on the other side. But here's the real issue. Another reason to keep him busy, right? But here's the real question. So wait, let me find it. So there was an Obama era edict. It turns out, and I'm going to find this paperwork because you know how I love to have paperwork here, who basically says that the Obama administration already had copies of these documents in hand, right? Hang on, we're going to find this. Come on. Yeah, hang on. You think I'm crazy, but it's somewhere in here. The Obama administration. There we go. So it's been revealed that the Obama era program cast doubt on the reasons for the Trump raid. So it turns out that the Department of Defense memo was just unearthed under a FOIA request, that the federal government already had the original copies of the documents that they seized at Mar-a-Lago. It is, look, so I want you to, because number one, you don't hang out with me enough. Number two, you don't look at the nooks and crannies of news. People just look at the first 5 minutes of news,
clearly,
and they miss all the stuff that's at the bottom. So this is called, all the good juice. This is called the Presidential Information Technology Community, PITC. It includes representatives from federal agencies, Department of Defense, Homeland Security. It was an Obama era executive order, right? Quote, a newly unearthed memo from Obama administration, Department of Defense confirmed that government already had originals of the alleged classified documents involved in Special Counsel Jack Smith's prosecution of President Trump. So wait a minute. So And it goes on, by the way, to say that this was hatched in the early days of the Biden administration, where they just said, let's go after him for classified documents, right? And we'll pretend we don't have them. But understand, they were also under orders to use all levels of force, right? They raid Mar-a-Lago, use deadly force if necessary to go get documents that the government supposedly now already had. So
this is, I'm telling you, if this is
how about girls?
Guys, ladies and gentlemen, oh my God. If this is not evidence of the corruption of our government, and I mean, I know coup isn't the right word here, but I can't help but feel like, look, out there in the audience, okay? If you do not understand by now that the government is not for you,
wait a minute. Wait.
And in fact, will go out of its way to keep you from electing the person that you want to run the country.
Look, there are still good people in government, right? The problem is, it's sort of like arguing, when you go against an agency, the FBI is corrupt, and I'm not saying they are, but it's the leadership, right? The rank and file are totally different. There are people. I mean, look, there's no question that during the Obama years and the Biden years, that the federal bureaucracy has now been seeded, SEEDED, like you seed the ground with plants, with people who are ideologically in line with this progressive woke mentality. And that's part of the problem. And that's why you get these knucklehead council members, even in the state level. Right. And there are plenty of examples of that. The State Department is infested with anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas people. That is the unspoken truth that anybody who knows Washington, D.C. knows that, right? But there are still good people in government. Yeah. So the problem comes down to not that don't trust the government. I agree that it's become more problematic lately. It's what do you do to recenter and take government back to the functions that it was supposed to do, right? And when you can go after a former president no pun intended or pun clearly intended, trumped up charges in several venues, right? New York, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., right? If you can do that, and none of these hold any water. Now, look, is Trump an angel? Probably not. I don't think anybody who runs for president is pure as the driven snow, and I'm not sure I want someone who's pure as the driven snow to be president, because you got to make some ugly decisions. So, it just, I sit there. Can we end this, though, on Joe Biden? I do want to end this on Biden.
All right.
Joe Biden in the football. You didn't see where Joe Biden was at West Point? He was making a speech, and he said that the reason he didn't get into the Naval Academy. I'm sorry, he was at the Naval Academy. No, West Point. Biden repeated story. Yeah, he was appointed to U.S. Naval Academy and wanted to play football, but his path was blocked because Roger Staubach was there. And the reason I take offense at that is two things. Number one, Roger Staubach was one of my childhood idols as Dallas Cowboy quarterback. Served in Vietnam, came back. But when you start talking about football, and Joe Biden was, this great football player apparently, and they couldn't get in, but he got in, but didn't take it. Doesn't it make you wonder about the real football he's carrying? You know what the football is, right? The football is the reference to the codes to the nuclear devices. If you're going to launch nuclear weapons, you need the football, and he always has someone with him who's carrying the football. So, I'm not concerned that Joe Biden lied yet again about getting into the Naval Academy to play football because Roger Staubach was there. I am concerned that you have some senile guy who is our leader. He's my president. Don't have to like him, but he's my president, is carrying the nuclear football. Just thought I'd put that out there. And they're all talking about, and the years don't line up. 61 versus 65. It's like, no, wait a minute.
His whole life is a plagiarism at this point.
You know what?
He doesn't
I used to say I wanted to come back in my life as one of my children. I think I want to come back in my next life as the life that Joe Biden thinks he led. Because, man.
It's very Benjamin Button.
Right. I want to come back as that guy. I mean, because he has like scaled Mount Everest in like a single bound, and he is faster than a speeding bullet. Oh, that's Superman. I'm sorry, but I get confused when I hear all the Biden stories because I'm thinking like I'm looking at Clark Kent. Where's Superman? I want to be that guy.
Well, speaking of where's Superman, where are we going to be in a week from now? Right back here with you guys having an awesome show. But for today, we got to wrap it up, y'all. All right. So make sure, like, share, and subscribe. If you've watched this long, we thank you very much. And if you liked it, give us a like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like it, thanks for watching and giving us some of your attention.
And if you need to reach me, Robert at coalition4america.com or at RB Chernin. Like us, don't like us, I can take the criticism. Bring it on.
And no after hours today, you guys. So make sure you come back next week for more. And hopefully we're going to cover the nonsense.
There is so much stuff we didn't cover today. I feel so bad, but
see you next week.
We'll cover more next week. I promise.
Oh my God. You just wait. You just wait.